Thank you for tuning in to Module 5 in the 2025 Municipal Affairs Election Training Program. This module will focus on voting opportunities. As a disclaimer, this video is intended as an introduction and overview of some of the things you need to know as a returning officer. This presentation does not provide a comprehensive review of the legislation and is not legal advice. If you have questions about how the legislation applies to specific facts, make sure to get advice from your legal counsel. If you watched our previous presentations, you already know that our 2025 training will be delivered in pre-recorded videos and posted to the Municipal Affairs website throughout the election year. If you haven't watched these presentations, please take some time to do so. In Module 5, we're focusing on voting opportunities. The remaining modules will be made available over the course of spring and summer 2025. In addition, the elections database videos provided by our information services team are up on our election resources page, along with specialized returning officer training for summer villages. So a quick module overview. We're going to talk about voter eligibility and identification requirements first, before getting into the provisions for voting subdivisions and voting stations. Next, we'll address the requirements for voting compartments, ballot boxes, and the ballots themselves. Finally, we'll discuss the various voting opportunities local jurisdictions can provide for their electors, including advance votes, special ballots, elector assistance, both at home and at the polls, institutional votes, and some new provisions that have been introduced with Bill 50 around elector assistance terminals. So starting with voter eligibility and identification. To be eligible to vote in a municipal election, a person must be at least 18 years of age or older, a Canadian citizen, and reside in Alberta. The person's place of residence is located in the local jurisdiction on election day. In this case of school board elections, the elector must also be a resident of the division or ward of the school district, and their eligibility to vote is based on the elector's declaration of eligibility to vote for either a public or separate school board trustee. For summer villages, electors must be at least 18 years old, a Canadian citizen, and either a resident of the summer village or be listed on the certificate of title as an owner of a property or the spouse or adult interdependent partner of a property owner. Section 48 outlines the rules that govern residents. Most important, a person may only be a resident of one place at a time for the purposes of voting. If a person does have more than one residence, that person must designate one residence as the person's permanent place of residence. A person's residence is determined in order of priority by the address provided on the person's driver's license or government-issued ID, the address to which the person's income tax correspondence is delivered, and last, the address to which the person's mail is delivered. A person's residence is where the person lives and sleeps and to which, during an absence, the person intends to return. And a student who attends an educational institution within or outside Alberta, who temporarily rents accommodation while in school, and has family members who are resident in Alberta and with whom the student ordinarily resides when not attending school, is deemed to reside with those family members. Please also be aware that Bill 50 will amend the LAEA to modify proof of elector eligibility rules for Jasper. This is to ensure Jasper residents affected by last year's fire can cast their ballots, receive special ballot packages, and stand for nomination. Jasper residents who have been displaced will be able to make a statement to confirm their residency and eligibility status pursuant to sections 48.1 and 53.03.
The rules governing proof of elector eligibility are outlined in Section 53 of the LAEA. However, there is a slight difference in these rules depending on whether you are conducting an election for municipal candidates only, or if your election is being held jointly with school divisions. So this has been broken down into the following two slides. First, in elections for municipal candidates only. If the elector is on the Permanent Elector Register, or PER for short, and their current address matches their government-issued photo identification, they do not need to fill out and sign the Statement of Elector Eligibility at the top of Form 13. Returning officers may still wish to consider having these electors complete the statement because the administrative portions of the form will still need to be completed by the deputy returning officer for each voter. However, this decision would ultimately be up to the elector in these cases. If the elector is not on the PER or is on the PER but has a different address within the local jurisdiction, ask them to produce the appropriate identification under Section 53, either one piece of government-issued photo ID with their name and address, or one piece of ID authorized by Elections Alberta that contains both their name and current address. Please note that not all the forms of ID listed by Elections Alberta will be acceptable for local elections. Only the ones that show both a name and current address may be used. Electors must print their name, address, and birth date in the spaces provided. Read the statement and sign it. The elector is not required to read the statement aloud, however. The DRO must complete the administrative portions of the form that follow. Also, please be aware that copies of Form 13 must be made at the voting station and then be used to revise the PER after the election. This is set out in Section 91.1, which is new for this election. Vouching is still permitted per Section 53 sub 4 and 53 sub 7. However, vouching is only permitted for establishing an elector's address, not their identity. To vouch for someone, the person vouching or the voucher will need to have proven their eligibility per Section 53 sub 3 and make a statement in the prescribed form that the elector knows the person being vouched for, knows the person lives at the address indicated on the person's statement, and the person vouching has not been vouched for or him or herself. Additionally, the person vouching will need to be on the permanent electors register. So if your municipality is not using a permanent elector register, as in a summer village, for instance, vouching will not be available to any electors. Now for the slight difference in proof of eligibility and identification if you are administering a joint election, which is an election for both municipal councillors and school trustees. In joint elections, if the elector is on the PER for the municipality and their current address matches their government-issued photo identification, the Statement of Elector Eligibility portion of Form 13 must still be completed in order to receive all the relevant ballots. This is because the PER only contemplates eligibility to vote municipally, but doesn't consider the different electoral boundaries often involved with school divisions that may encompass multiple municipalities. Similarly to non-joint elections, if the elector is not on the PER or is on the PER but has a different address within the local jurisdiction, they must produce the appropriate identification under Section 53, either one piece of government-issued photo ID with their name and address, or one piece of ID authorized by Elections Alberta that contains both their name and current address. Again, please note that not all the forms of ID listed by Elections Alberta will be acceptable for local elections. Only the ones that show both a name and current address may be used. Electors must print their name, address, and birth date in the spaces provided on Form 13, read the statement, and sign it. Again, the elector is not required to read the statement aloud. Please be aware that copies of Form 13 must be made at the voting station and then be used to revise the PER after the election. This is set out in Section 91.1, which is new. The DRO must complete the administrative portions of the form that follow. The rules for vouching also apply to jointly administered elections.
Moving on to voting subdivisions, stations, compartments, boxes, and ballots. An elected authority has the ability by resolution, or to authorize the returning officer by resolution, to divide the jurisdiction into voting subdivisions before giving notice of an election. If voting subdivisions are not established, the area or the ward, if there are wards, is one voting subdivision. The returning officer must also designate the location of one voting station only for each voting subdivision. The location may also be outside the area if necessary. However, Section 37 also allows for more than one voting station to be designated in each voting subdivision if the elected authority passes a bylaw before June 30th, allowing the returning officer to designate more than one voting station for each subdivision, along with their location. If a voting station is not available on election day, the returning officer must designate another location and post notices directing electors to the new station. As a result, we would highly recommend that you plan for a backup location in case something happens. Let's talk about some of the things you'll need to have ready for conducting the vote. It's a good idea to have all your supplies ready well in advance of election day. Every voting station must have at least one voting compartment at which electors can mark their ballots in secrecy and without interruption or interference. A compartment must include a table or desk with a privacy screen and a pen or pencil. When setting up your voting stations, make sure no one can see how electors will be voting. Election staff should also regularly check that no one leaves any written material or writes anything in the compartment. Section 39 requires ballot boxes to be made from a durable material and constructed in such a way that ballots cannot be removed unless the seal is broken. We can't recommend vendors for election supplies, but we do have a sample supply list up on our resources page. Also, a quick Google search should give you an idea of where supplies can be purchased. Or you can speak to your counterparts in other municipalities. Ballots are addressed in sections 41 through 43. The returning officer is responsible for printing a sufficient number of ballots using Form 9. Separate ballots must be used for each office. Ballots must contain a brief explanatory note stating the maximum number of candidates who can be voted for in order not to make the ballot subject to rejection. Each ballot will have the name of each candidate, and the names are to be arranged alphabetically by last name. Municipalities may also have ballots printed in lots pursuant to Section 43 sub 3 if a bylaw allowing this is passed 2 months before the election. Ballots should be ordered as soon as you have a confirmed list of candidate names. Always check the line on the nomination form where candidates have indicated how they want their name to appear on the ballot. This may be different from the name on the first page of the form. Also make sure to select a heavier than normal paperweight or stock so you cannot see through it after a ballot is marked by an elector. Consider using different colors of paper for each of the offices. This will speed up the sorting and counting process. And what about the ballot form for a vote on a question? Section 44 provides that if there is to be a vote on a bylaw or question, the elected authority must determine the wording of the question on the ballot by resolution. And remember, a separate ballot is needed for a vote on a question as well. Moving on to voting opportunities. Municipalities may offer additional voting options for electors depending on the needs of their municipality. These options may include advance votes, special ballots, incapacitated elector at a voting station or at home, and institutional votes. Section 73 requires local jurisdictions with populations greater than 5,000 to hold an advance vote. This section also allows local jurisdictions with populations of less than 5,000 to hold an advance vote if permitted by council resolution. When a resolution has been passed, the returning officer has authority to determine the dates and hours that advance votes will be held. No advance vote may be held within 24 hours of election day. What are the requirements to provide notice of an advance vote? The same prescribed format for notice of election day is used, that is Form 7. This notice is provided following the same rules for notice of nomination day and notice of election. Notice of election and notice of advance vote may be combined on the same notice, provided the publication timing requirements have been met. A fresh ballot box must be used on each day of the advance vote, at the end of which the boxes are sealed and stored in a secure place until they are open to be counted at the close of the voting stations on election day. Quick note on special ballots. Council will still need to pass a resolution before nomination day to offer special ballots. However, special ballots may now be issued to any elector who is on the permanent electors register and who applies for one. Electors who are not on the permanent electors register may apply to be added to it pursuant to section 77.1 sub 1.1. Forms 22 through 25 are for special ballots. If you will be offering special ballots, make sure you understand the relevant provisions of the LAEA as well as how the forms must be used. At the request of an elector, a deputy returning officer must assist in the marking of a ballot of a voter who is unable to vote in the usual manner. The election worker must read the verbal statement on Form 17 to the elector, and then initial it if the elector answers in the affirmative. A deputy returning officer does not have to complete the Statement of Friend or Relative form. However, the elector who is unable to vote in the usual manner section of Form 13 must be completed. If an elector is accompanied by a friend or relative, the corresponding portion of Form 17 must also be completed. No later than June 30th in the year of a general election, an elector may also request a blind voter template and instructions to use the template from the returning officer. If an elector is physically unable to enter the voting station, a deputy may set up a voting compartment for the elector in the voting station or the closest point of access to the voting station that the elector is able to attend. Elector assistance at home is addressed in Section 79. This section applies to electors who are unable to attend a voting station due to physical disability. If a resolution has been passed, the returning officer must provide for 2 deputy returning officers to attend the home of an elector during the hours of an advance vote, or other times fixed by resolution. This is to take the votes of the elector at those places. If the returning officer is satisfied that an elector is unable to attend a voting station or an advance voting station because of physical disability, the returning officer shall include that elector's name and address on a list. Please also be aware that Bill 50 includes amendments to the LAEA to allow for elector assistance terminals. If passed, Section 84.1 will give municipalities authority to pass a bylaw before June 30th, allowing for elector assistance terminals. And finally, a note on institutional votes. An elected authority may pass a resolution allowing for the designation of the location of 1 or more institutional voting stations. The returning officer must fix the times on election day that the votes in the institutions will be taken. Section 80 also allows an institutional vote to be held on the same day the advance vote is being held. Only those electors who are confined to a treatment center or supporting living facility that is established as an institutional voting station are eligible to vote at that voting station. Candidates, official agents, and scrutineers may only attend if the vote is conducted at a fixed location in a public area of the institution. They may not attend voting conducted in the room of a resident of the institution. Notice, again using Form 7, must be posted in a conspicuous place in the institution not fewer than 2 days before the day on which the vote is to be taken. The ballot boxes cannot be opened until the close of the voting stations on election day. The ballots from institutional votes may also be counted at a counting center if a bylaw permitting this has been passed by June 30th, and a counting center has been designated by the returning officer. If a counting center has not been designated pursuant to Section 85.1, the ballot box is to be counted at the institutional vote location once the vote has closed. And that concludes Module 5. Please remember to review our additional election resources online. If you have questions about school board elections, please contact Alberta Education. Updated versions of the MGA and LAEA can be accessed or ordered through the King's printer, and questions about the elections database can be sent to our information services team.